Welcome back to the Kinpath Educational Series. I'm Hannah, and today we're going to be looking at the evidence behind surrogacy, more specifically, the review of psychosocial evidence surrounding assisted reproduction. If you've spent any time researching surrogacy, you've probably noticed that there's no shortage of opinions, but opinions aren't always backed by evidence. Today, we're going to look at what decades of research actually tell us about assisted reproductive techniques, or ART, and specifically gestational surrogacy. This presentation is based on a comprehensive review published in JBRA Assisted Reproduction in 2025, which analysed decades of international research on the psychological and social outcomes of infertility treatment, donor conception, and surrogacy. Rather than relying on a single study, it brings together findings from numerous high-quality studies to identify the overall trends in the evidence. Throughout this presentation, we'll explore what the research tells us about children, parents, relationships, surrogates, and the ethical considerations surrounding surrogacy. My goal isn't to convince you that surrogacy is right for everyone, it's simply to help separate evidence from misconception. We'll explore what the evidence says about intended parents, gestational carriers, children born through surrogacy, and the factors that contribute to positive outcomes. Before we focus specifically on surrogacy, it's helpful to understand where it fits in within assisted reproductive techniques. ART is an umbrella term that includes a range of medical treatments designed to help people build their families. Many people immediately think of IVF, but ART also includes egg donation, sperm donation, and gestational surrogacy. Each of these pathways exist because families come in many different forms. Some people experience infertility, others have medical conditions that make pregnancy unsafe, some are single by choice, and others are same-sex couples who require reproductive assistance. Recently, the American Society of Reproductive Medicine broadened their term of infertility to include these other factors. And although these journeys look different, they're all supported by decades of scientific development aimed at helping people become parents safely and ethically. Importantly, the review reminds us that while art has become increasingly common, infertility itself remains a significant emotional challenge for many people. The psychological impact often begins long before the treatment even starts. One of the reasons this research is so important is because infertility is far more common than people realize. Around 1 in 6 worldwide will experience infertility at some point in their lives. Since the first IVF baby was born in 1978, more than 8 million children have been born through assisted reproductive techniques, giving researchers over 50 years of evidence to study the long-term outcomes. Early research naturally focused on pregnancy and birth rates. Today, researchers are asking different questions. How are these children developing? What are these families like? How do relationships change? And the reassuring news is that the evidence is overwhelmingly positive. With appropriate support, ART has proven to be a safe and effective pathway to parenthood. One of the most common concerns people have is about the well-being of children conceived through ART. Fortunately, this is also one of the most researched areas. Across numerous studies, children born through IVF, donor conception, and surrogacy demonstrate normal emotional development, healthy friendships, age-appropriate social skills, and comparable academic performance to children conceived without ART. Researchers have found no increased rates of behavioral or emotional difficulties simply because a child was conceived through assisted reproduction. That's an important point. The evidence consistently tells us that the way a child comes into the world does not determine how they develop psychologically. What matters far more is the environment they're raised in, the love, security, and support they receive throughout their childhood. So when researchers looked across decades of evidence, what did they find? The answer was remarkably consistent. Families created through assisted reproductive techniques are healthy, resilient, and thriving. Perhaps the biggest message from this review is that family isn't defined by biology alone. It's defined by love, care, commitment, and relationships people build with one another. That's something the research repeatedly reinforces across different countries, cultures, and treatment types. This slide summarizes several of the individual studies included in the review. Although the research spans different countries and different types of assisted reproduction, the overall findings are strikingly similar. Children born through art consistently demonstrate emotional, behavioral, and psychosocial outcomes comparable to their naturally conceived peers. Interestingly, many adolescents and young adults conceived through surrogacy or donor conception describe feeling either neutral or even positive about how they were conceived. Some express curiosity about their origins, but very few describe their conception as a source of distress. Taken together, these findings provide strong reassurance for intended parents considering art. The review also examined parenting itself. Do parents who have experienced infertility or undergone art parent differently? Some studies found that art parents can initially be a little more protective or anxious, which is understandable after a long, arduous fertility journey. However, these differences don't translate into poorer parenting or poorer outcomes for the children. In fact, many families function exceptionally well. The review also highlights the importance of openness. Parents who have honest, age appropriate conversations with their children about how they were conceived often report lower anxiety and stronger family relationships over time. The research suggests that transparency builds trust. Another misconception is that fertility treatment places unbearable strain on relationships. While infertility itself is undeniably stressful, the evidence doesn't suggest art damages healthy relationships. In fact, many couples describe becoming closer through shared goals, vulnerability, and mutual support. Going through challenges together can strengthen communication and resilience. That doesn't mean the journey is easy, but overall, research has found that treatment often strengthens rather than weakens committed relationships. The review returns to a theme we've already touched on: openness. Parents who approach conversations about conception honestly and in an age appropriate way help children develop a healthy understanding of their story. Research suggests openness supports identity development, reduces anxiety, and strengthens trust within families. When challenges do arise, they're usually linked to stigma, secrecy, or lack of support, not to assisted reproduction itself. Now let's focus specifically on gestational surrogacy. People pursue surrogacy for many different reasons. Some are unable to carry a pregnancy because of medical conditions. Others were born without a functional uterus. Some are male couples, single men, or transgender individuals who cannot carry a pregnancy themselves. The review found that intended parents pursuing surrogacy show psychological profiles similar to those pursuing other forms of assisted reproductive techniques. Importantly, the relationships between gestational carriers and intended parents are generally characterized by communication, respect, and mutual support. Most gestational carriers report positive experiences and describe genuine fulfillment from helping another family grow. This is perhaps the heart of the presentation today. Across the studies included in the review, intended parents report high levels of satisfaction with surrogacy. Gestational carriers overwhelmingly describe positive experiences and do not experience long-term psychological harm simply because they acted as a surrogate. Children born through surrogacy continue to demonstrate healthy emotional and cognitive social development. The review concludes that positive outcomes are most consistently achieved when surrogacy is supported by thorough counselling, strong legal frameworks, and open communication between everyone involved. In other words, good systems matter. Of course, this doesn't mean the journey is easy. We would know that all too well. Infertility is emotionally demanding. Treatment can involve grief, anxiety, financial pressure, and uncertainty. But one of the most encouraging findings from the review is that people adapt remarkably well over time. Counseling, peer support, supportive partners, and experienced professionals all contribute to resilience throughout the process. The emotional challenges are very real, but they are also manageable with the right support. If I had to choose one theme that appears throughout the entire body of research, it would be communication. Successful surrogacy arrangements consistently involve honest conversations, clear expectations, mutual respect, and ongoing support. At Kinpath, communication is something we value deeply because the evidence continually points to it as one of the strongest predictors of positive experiences for intended parents, gestational carriers, and ultimately the children. Communication doesn't eliminate challenges, but it helps people navigate them together. Here, I'll briefly touch on the fact that this is why we've created our Kinpath app, which you can look into further on our website. But it provides a really great platform for intended parents and surrogates to be able to share that open line of communication without constant interference from the supporting agency, which would be ourselves. No discussion about surrogacy would be complete without acknowledging the ethical questions. The review recognises concerns including exploitation, cross border legal issues, citizenship, and the need for strong regulation. Importantly, however, the authors don't conclude that these concerns justify rejecting surrogacy altogether. Instead, they argue that ethical practice, appropriate legislation, comprehensive screening, and professional oversight are the way forward. The message isn't that surrogacy is free from complexity, it's that complexity should be managed responsibly. So, what can we take away from all of this? After decades of research involving thousands of families, the evidence is remarkably consistent. Children conceived through art thrive. Parents form healthy, loving relationships with their children. Surrogates generally report positive, fulfilling experiences. The greatest challenges tend to come not from assisted reproduction itself, but from infertility, stigma, legal complexity, and inadequate support. When surrogacy is ethical, well regulated, and supported by clear communication, counselling, and experienced professionals, it provides a safe and positive pathway to parenthood for many families. Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope this presentation has helped answer some of your questions and provided a clearer understanding of what the evidence really tells us about assisted reproductive techniques and surrogacy. If you'd like to learn more about surrogacy or explore additional educational resources, we invite you to visit Kinpath's website or get in touch with our team. Thank you for watching. Just quickly before we go, I'd also like to just highlight some of our references here. Firstly, I'd like to acknowledge our heartfelt gratitude to the following studies for advancing research in assisted reproductive techniques, surrogacy, and psychosocial impacts. Just up here in the bold is the study that this review is based on, with further mention to the following studies. Thank you. Bye.